Hello, everyone. You having a good time so far? All right, I'm Joy Randalls. I represent the Tampa Bay chapter here by way of Atlanta. I was born and raised in Atlanta. So we've got a really awesome group coming up for you right now. So Nicole Sanchez came from she actually got her start at Kapoor. She now has her own consultancy called Via Consulting. She's going to be interviewing your guests tonight, which are on a panel talking a bit about diversity and the emerging face of technology. So Laura Powers is the co-founder and CEO of Code2040, which is an organization that's dedicated to creating pathways to success for Latinas and Blacks in our society. In addition, she's got her Bachelor's of Arts from Harvard University, her JD and her MBA from Stanford University. We have Johnny C. Taylor Jr., who is the president and CEO of the Thurgood Marshall College Fund, which represents the historically Black universities and colleges in our country, and they're creating the next generation of leaders that are diverse. Johnny also sits on the board of Gallup. So please put your hands together and give a big round of applause for our next group.
Hello. Good afternoon. I'm Nicole.
I'm Laura.
I'm Johnny.
Hi, thank you so much hi Bianca St. Louis, who's sitting in the front. Thank you so much for electing to be in this session. This is one that is near and dear to all of our hearts. My name is Nicole Sanchez, as we said, and I am the CEO and founder of Via Consulting, a firm that works with tech companies to increase their diversity on their staff. And Laura can talk a little bit about Code2040, and we'll have Johnny just do a quick introduction of the Thurgood Marshall Fund.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Laura Weidman Powers. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Code2040. In short, we create programs that create pathways into the tech sector for Blacks and Latinos. So we're best known for our Fellows program, where we bring top-performing Black and Latino computer science students to the Bay Area for the summer, set them up with internships at tech companies, and do a career accelerator with them. We've just launched a couple new things as well, which I'm sure we'll circle back to.
And I'm Johnny Taylor. Flew in just now from China, and I was telling a story there that everyone thought I was Kobe. So I was actually important for 3 days in China, and I was signing autographs and everything. In any event, I am really, in my real life, I'm the president of the Thurgood Marshall College Fund, and we represent the country's historically Black colleges and universities. They are historically Black, it's important for you to remember, but not exclusively Black. And just as a factoid, a couple of our schools are actually a majority white now, although they are historically Black. So we have a very interesting diversity world in the HBCU space. Again, we represent the publicly supported HBCUs, and we are trying to provide a solution, an innovative solution for you all in the Valley as you work on your diversity opportunity.
Woo! Great. Thank you. So I'm going to frame this a little bit so that we're not just going willy-nilly. We're of the shared belief that diversity is not a luxury, diversity is a necessity in this space. That if we truly want to bring about the next generation of innovation and technology, we've got to find and retain and promote talent from communities that have been overlooked by this sector since its inception. That includes, oh, you can clap for that. That includes women from all backgrounds, people of color, folks who do not identify as male or female, folks with disabilities, folks from all over the world. It is incredibly important that we seek this talent out and cultivate it in this space. Otherwise, we are not going to actually be able to bring technology to bear on actual social problems. So with that, I've personally been working on this for about 21 years. Yeah, I know, right? Since I was 12. And actually, that wouldn't make me that. Still, anyway. That said, you guys, why is this still so hard for companies to get right? Laura, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge, and I think it's important, actually, that we all recognize that this is a hard problem for a lot of people to solve, because I think in some cases, people don't feel comfortable actually having the dialogue about it because there's some shame that people feel about not being able to solve the problem in their companies. And so part of what we think about at Code2040 is like, yeah, this is hard. How do we all embrace the fact that it's hard? But I think, in a lot of cases, for a lot of companies, who have achieved success without achieving diversity, there's a little bit of a feeling of like, well, if we've come so far without figuring this out, like how important can it really be?
Right.
And so what we also talk about at Code 2040 is this idea of the year 2040, when people of color will be the majority in the US, and the fact that as we go towards that year, population growth is coming from minority communities. And actually, if you intend to have your company grow and thrive and stick around, you actually have to figure out how to attract and hire and retain diverse talent, because you simply won't be able to find enough folks who aren't from all different backgrounds if you want to grow your company. So that's kind of how we think about it.
Wonderful, thank you.
So I think the biggest challenge, why it's so difficult, and I've been at this for a while, a few more years than you, 22, but in any event, I think it's because this is an area where we lack innovation. Guys, the reality is we continue to try to solve this problem in the way that we did it 20, 30, 40 years ago. And in a group like this, where you all are the epitome, the essence of innovation, when it comes to diversity, it's the area where you're not particularly innovative. You keep doing the things that you've done, and what's that, the definition of lunacy or whatever, is to continue doing the same thing and expect a different set of results. Well, that's the problem in diversity. I came into this space as a head of HR for a company called IAC. You may be familiar with Barry Diller's company. We owned Ask.com, Match.com, HSN, Ticketmaster. So I am a tech guy. I got my teeth right here in the valley with IAC. And we were struggling with diversity challenges 10 years ago and continue to struggle. And it's because no one takes an innovative, sort of looks at this through the lens of sort of an innovative approach. How are we going to solve a problem? How are we going to create an opportunity for our organizations, which increasingly are going to need to hire diverse talent? The second point that I think is really important is we focus so much on diversity. By the way, achieving diversity is pretty simple in some ways. You just go out and you bring a lot of people together. The bigger challenge is inclusiveness. So too often the focus is you get the talent in the house and then you don't make them feel comfortable there, and therefore you can't retain them. So I would just say in all of our conversation, we need to talk about diversity and inclusion if we ultimately want to be successful in this space.
Yeah, I would really agree with that. So when I work with companies, I find that there are a lot of places where the system is broken between education and the higher levels of any company. There's a long pipeline there. And the easy thing to do is to point to the early stages of the pipeline and say, well, the pipeline is broken back there.
That's right.
When in fact, in this country, 14%, which is still not high enough, but 14% of all undergraduates who are coming out with a computer science degree are Black or Latino. 14%. So again, we want it to be higher, but if the valley looks like somewhere around 3 or 4%, we're losing every year a bunch of talent that goes somewhere else. So talk a little bit about how you approach the pipeline problem and how you talk about it at Code 2040 and how you talk about it at Thurgood Marshall.
Yeah, it's a critical point because too often, the pipeline is an excuse for, well, there's nothing we can do. By the time, we're looking for talent, it's already too late. And it's really not true. And I think it's not true both because of the stat that you cite, but also because there's actually a lot of, the startup boot camp, the coding boot camp model has shown that, in 3 months you can take somebody from novice to software developer. And there's a huge need for companies to recognize also that maybe what they've used as their hiring criteria to figure out who actually is a right fit and can perform is part of what is allowing them to fail at finding diverse talent. Culture fit is something that is talked about a lot in the Valley, and it is so important. Culture is extremely important to companies, but also being reflective on what are the parts of your culture that are helping you succeed and what are the parts of your culture that are holding you back, and how does that trickle down into the hiring process. And maybe culture fit is actually an excuse in some cases as opposed to a legitimate reason.
And I sort of reject the whole notion that there is not enough talent. Where are they? We can't find diverse talent. Well, the reality is we can solve any problem we want to solve. I just reject this notion, right? And so, thank you. But it means that you have to be very intentional. very focused. I remember, and many of you are probably too young for this, but around Y2K in 1999, everyone was worried that the lights would turn off, computers would go blank, and the world would come to an end. And the reality is we put a lot of money, we put the smartest minds, no matter what they looked like, talk about fit, we didn't even care about those issues. Were you smart enough to help us avoid this cataclysmic disaster called Y2K, the year 2000 coming in? And I think if you approach your diversity challenges in the same way, with the same sort of intentionality, putting the right human resources and financial resources against it, you can solve it. We can solve any problem that we want. And so we just have to decide that we have the will to do this. If 14% of these students are coming through with STEM degrees, then there is a talent pool there. There's no way to explain why you only have 3% of the employee profile, people of diverse talent.
Yeah, that's right. We were having a conversation backstage about some of the things that we wanted to make sure you all knew as you go out and about in the world and potentially care about this and want to talk about it. And one of those things was the notion of colorblindness, which we all summarily rejected. And we all have horrible stories about colorblindness as an aspiration. Colorblindness as an aspiration is unrealistic, and it's not going to help us get where we need to go. But I would love for you guys to share some of the thoughts that you shared backstage about colorblindness as an aspiration.
First of all, don't ever say that. It's just like, take it out of your lexicon. The concept of being colorblind is dumb. The idea, and I kind of explain it this way, if I were to go to a botanical garden, the last thing I want to do is walk into a place where everything looks the same, right? I want some roses and some this kind of flower and some carnations. I want all sorts of different flowers. I want to appreciate the diversity, not be convinced that, well, we're all the same color and it's just not interesting. And so the notion of, it's not even a compliment to me as an African American, and by the way, yes, I'm an African American, but it's not even a compliment to me when someone says, I don't even see your color. What? Like, that's
not
dumb.
A compliment, guys.
That's just not a compliment.
Pass that around to your friends when you leave here.
I want you to see me. I just want you to accept it. I want you to understand the value that I bring because of my different perspective. And it's deeper than my skin color, by the way. And so that's when I think you're achieving something. This notion that somehow I'm colorblind is a positive is really, really a bad idea.
Yeah, +1.
Well, why don't you each talk about a few of the initiatives that you're really excited about coming out of your organizations, because I'm really happy to report that Google just made a very significant grant to Code2040 to the tune of
$775,000.
$775,000 for this effort. So if you could talk a little bit about that, and then Johnny, you could talk about what's going on in your organization.
Yeah, so we announced last week 2 new programs. This is actually Code2040's 3rd anniversary, and we're going from 1 program to 3 programs, which I thought was nice and poetic. But we've taken, over the course of running the Fellows Program for 3 years, we've had about 1,000 students apply. We've talked to about 200 different tech companies in the Bay Area, actually placed talent at about 35 or 40 companies, and had about 50 fellows go through. And so we realized that we were starting to gain this body of knowledge, on the one hand, on how students of color were kind of showing up to the assessment, on the other hand, how companies were assessing those students. And so we've started to take that data and that knowledge and translate it into additional programming. So with support from Google, their 10x thinking has inspired us to go from the 50 students so far to 5,000 students over the next 2 years with online and workshop-based programming, where we'll help show them exactly what they need to do to demonstrate their talent so that companies can recognize it and then connect them to opportunities. And the second program that we're rolling out is entrepreneurship focused. So looking at how we help support and stimulate entrepreneurial communities around the country to connect them better to the communities of color that are right there, and in many cases quite entrepreneurial themselves. So we're actually, applications are open right now for our first 3 entrepreneurs in residence in Austin, Chicago, and Durham. And those folks will both be supported by Code2040 and Google in the launch of their own venture, and they'll help us think about how to build the entrepreneurial community in the most diverse, inclusive way possible in those cities. So that's what we're working on now.
Who's funding the entrepreneurship initiative?
That's also Google.
That's also Google.
Yeah, Google for Entrepreneurs.
Great.
So you don't have the powered by up here, but similarly.
Great. Thank you so much, Johnny.
Well, so we're evolving. As I said, because of my experience as an HR guy in the tech space, we began several years ago with building a talent acquisition process whereby we identify talent, some of the 300,000 students on our campuses, and we introduce them to major employers for good jobs, not just jobs, but good jobs. And then we evolved. Last year, it was about a year and a half ago, we acquired a group called the Opportunity Funding Corporation, which focused on OFC, which focused on entrepreneurialism. We said many of our students will want to get a job, but some of our students need to be job creators. And so the next sort of step in our evolution was to identify students who had special entrepreneurial talent and characteristics, and then we would invest in them and ensure that they had opportunities. Well, the best is yet to come. In about 2 weeks, we're going to be announcing a very special partnership with Startup Grind. I'm very, very excited that, yes. And I don't know how much I'm supposed to say, so my people are in the field saying, Johnny, don't say anything, but I think it's like Startup University or something like that. They might change the name after this, but in any event, the notion is, so we've found employees people who want to work in the tech industry. And then the next phase was people who want to start up companies. And so that's where we've now evolved to. So over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be identifying some of our best and brightest students on HBCU campuses, and they're going to partner with the Startup Grind folks, and we're going to start to really help do our part in diversifying Silicon Valley.
Yeah, that's what we like to hear. All right, we're going to each share a final thought with you because we're almost done with time. And if that's okay with you, I'll start. I want you to look at the empty seats in the room, okay? There used to be a time when this wouldn't even be a session at a conference. So hooray that we're a session at any conference, especially Startup Grind. South by Southwest is evolving in this way so that there's a little bit more discussion about this, and other big conferences are doing the same. But there are still too many empty seats in this room. So what I want you to do is think about who in your work life should be sitting in this room and start to engage them in a conversation about how your organization or your company is going to change. Diversity is not a luxury, even if you are a team of 2 or 3. You have got to bake it in from the very, very beginning. And yes, it's hard, but it's not impossible. And if you don't know how to do it, find people who know how to do it. And let your budget reflect your priorities. I often tell my clients, don't tell me your priorities or your values, show me your budget, and I will tell you what your budget and what your priorities and your values are. This actually costs money. You wouldn't go out into the world and think you're gonna get customers with a marketing budget of 0. You're not going to be able to change the dynamics and the demographics of your company if you're not willing to put some resources behind it. So those are the 2 things that I want you to walk away with in here. Who do you want to engage in this conversation? And remember that it actually is going to be hard and cost resources, but it will be worth it.
I think, one of the most exciting things that I saw when we were starting Code 2040 was the number of people of all backgrounds who came out of the woodwork and said, oh my gosh, I have been thinking about this and I really want to do something to help, but I have had no idea what to do. And so I would encourage you all to think about if this is something that you care about, what it is that you can do. Back when we started Code 2040 3 years ago, there actually weren't that many organizations working on this. It was pretty hard to find a place to volunteer your time, but that's not really the case anymore. There's a lot of organizations like Code 2040 working on different pieces of this issue, and we're always looking for support of various kinds for our students, for our operations, and our mentors over the summer are white, black, Asian, male, female, Latino, like across the board. So this is by no means, by diverse people, for diverse people. This is diversity in its truest form, everybody across the board thinking about and caring about this. So it really is something that everybody can have an impact on. So I would encourage you to think about what your impact is going to be.
And related to that, what I'd like to leave you with is diversity matters, and you can't approach this because it's the legal thing to do or because civil rightsy sort of. Don't let that be your motivating factor. You should do it because it's smart business, because it's the right thing to do. And if you decide that's sort of why you're going to go at this, then applying the right resources. This is a doable, this is a fixable problem. And so it would only start with people like you all. So thank you for allowing us to share this time with you today.
Thank you so much, everybody. Really appreciate it.